So, the brief history of tobacco. Um, well, a new world was discovered by Christopher Columbus in the 15th century. You might say a new world for the Europeans, but I'm sure the American indigenous people knew about their world for centuries before. And I think Christopher Columbus pretty much stimulated the first recognizable commercialization of tobacco as a product. Now, a French chap, Jean Nicot, introduced tobacco to the French, and indeed the word nicotine to our language. Now, Sir Walter Raleigh is perhaps who the English most associate with bringing tobacco to our shores in the 16th century. But it's more likely that tobacco was around in England long before this. And as the Queen and her courtiers began smoking, the early popularization of this participation began within the general masses. And this was in the 17th century. And I think it's quite interesting that King James I wrote his counterblast to tobacco, and he described smoking as a custom loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, dangerous to the lungs, and in the black and stinking fume thereof, nearest resembling the horrible Stygian smoke of the pit that is bottomless. And he wasn't wrong. And he put an import tax on tobacco, and also around the same time the Catholic Church tried to discourage the use of tobacco and declared it to be sinful and banned it from all their worship sites. However, we still saw a growth in the use of tobacco and the trading in tobacco and the various different forms of tobacco. Snuff became very popular. And even smoking was being recommended as a healthful, protective act. And when we had the bubonic plague in the 17th century, tobacco smoking was widely recommended for helping to protect people against the bad air that was purportedly kind of causing this transmission of infection. Indeed, at the height of the plague, smoking a pipe at breakfast was actually made compulsory for schoolboys at Eton. We also have the concept of, in the Georgian era, of physicians recommending the use of smoke enemas. And we even had tobacco smoke enema kits placed along the River Thames by the Royal Humane Society. And this was used to help people who were being resuscitated or attempted to be from drowning. And tobacco smoke was considered to be a useful remedy for a cold. Interesting. And also it was recommended in the fields of anatomy, and strongly recommended, for example, when doctors, surgeons, medical students were working in dissecting rooms to protect them from potential diseases emanating from the body. And also medically, we've had an unusual medical prescription, asthma cigarettes. Now, interestingly, these weren't using tobacco, but I just think it kind of illustrates an aspect of smoking. and this used the plant stramonium rather than tobacco, which has or had at that recommended time antispasmodic effects, which may have helped to relieve some of the symptoms of asthma, constricted airways. But it's highly likely that the benefits would be lost by the irritation of the smoke. I put this little table together. Gives us a little timeline appreciation of the world of tobacco and smoking and what happened in the world over the 6 or 7 centuries that it became prevalent. So obviously, tobacco was it wasn't instantly available after Christopher Columbus. It was obviously around for centuries before. But we saw Columbus, Nico, Raleigh, and then the growth of the tobacco industry, essentially, with the farming, supply, retail, different types of tobacco. And the first tobacco factories in the 18th century. We did start, as well as James I in the 17th century, we had other various kind of anti-establishment, really, alternative associations looking at anti-smoking, such as the American temperance movement. We had the development and introduction of safety matches. These are matches that will only light on the striking surface that's on the box, and these were made to support the growth and popularity in people smoking. And certainly, although there was a Children's Act which was prohibiting the sale of tobacco to children at the age of 16 in the early 20th century, I think it's widely recognised that smoking was highly popular and supported by the government during the First World War. It was almost like a pacifier for the troops, something that kind of gave them that moment of peace and reflection and comradeship. And also it was used as a gift. In fact, I've got a tobacco case that was given to my great grandfather in the First World War. We saw some initial research into the potential for lung cancer in the 1930s. But there was still a continued growth of smoking and popularisation. We did see a doctor's study came out in 1956, which was quite landmark. We'll talk about that in a moment. And a number of other things that occurred during the latter part of the 20th century and into the 21st. So, we've had, the first ever kind of smoking world conferences, changes to advertising standards, first health warnings on tobacco packaging, and then the first kind of smoking cessation aids being produced and delivered, and nicotine replacements, and e-cigarettes, and then new UK smoking legislations banning smoking in pubs, public places, workplaces, and anybody that's old enough to appreciate the workplace, back in the 1970s, 80s, will remember a workplace that was very different to the ones we have now. So this British doctor's study was by Doll and Hill, and quite a landmark study, both in terms of firmly establishing the link between smoking and lung disease and mortality, but also as an influential large-scale epidemiological study. And this study actually continued for quite a few years. Prior to that, in the 1920s and 30s, we had a strange kind of advertising media promoting medical people promoting smoking. A strange consideration when we look at it now. Fascinating. And this was also popularized in athletic behaviors as well. Smoke this type of cigarette and you're likely to protect yourself against the coughs and irritations, and also you're going to be able to be more active and get yourself out of this kind of old you and into the new you and be sporty. A big money business. You need never feel over-smoked. That's the miracle of Marlboro. Marlboro man. And obviously smoking culture was everywhere in the mid and tail end of the 20th century. Obviously you've got James Dean, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Louis Armstrong, Frank Sinatra, Winston Churchill. And here's a more recent one, Pulp Fiction. Smoking icons, essentially. And look at this, Stanley Matthews, who was the country's most famous footballer at one point. And here he is, the cigarette for me. Smooth, clean smoking. And it wasn't just in this country, in America. George Roden, 1952 Olympic 400 meter champion. Refined smoking flavor. And these are the brands that were all over the place back in the end of last century. And also we had a large tobacco sponsorship in sport. So obviously Formula One, World Embassy Snooker Championships. That's Bill Werbenek, who also was famous for drinking probably about 20 pints of lager while he was playing as well. I don't think he was ever champion. He was a good player though. Cricket, Benson and Hedges Cup. So, tobacco all over our culture. But then we kind of moved into a new era, and this new era was quite revolutionary in terms of both the anti-smoking messaging and the advertising and media technology that was being used to now try and create a shift in public behaviour. We had new smoking legislations introduced in 2006, 2007. We had changes to the law in the ways all those brands that we just looked at, like Silk Cut and Benson and Hedges, no longer could have their attractive boxes to sell to the nation. They're now graphic with clear messages about how bad this product is for one's health.